Hello everybody, and welcome to my cozy corner. Today I will be reading Minerva King's Detective Club by James Patterson and Kiera Graff. Now, today is a special visit to the cozy corner because the story I will read to you is a little long, and this makes it a first for the cozy corner. So without further ado, here we go! Prologue. Adults just love asking us what we want to be when we grow up. I guess they think it's cute when we answer an astronaut or a rock star or your boss, so I can make you stop asking me questions. But it's hard to predict the future. I never even thought about saying I wanted to be a detective any more than a grass inspector or a night watchman at a mattress store. I don't mean those are bad jobs, or that they aren't interesting in their own ways. They're just jobs I never even thought about. But that was before the murders in my building. That's right, murders with a capital S. Not one, not two, but, well, keep reading. You'll find out who died, who almost died, and whose lives I helped save. Hint, one of them was my own. I'm not even the only kid at school who's a detective now, but we don't let just anybody join our club. Our members have to be curious, creative, and good at spotting clues. Does that sound like anyone you know? Does that sound like you? Chapter 1. At the marble-topped chess table in the wood-panel lounge of our apartment building, I sat across from my elderly neighbor, Kermit Hermanson. Both of us were playing fast and furiously. I wanted to win so badly it was killing me. It was my turn, so I moved my knight into the center of the board and stopped my chess clock with a click, starting Kermit's time. We each had only 10 minutes to play the whole game. Kermit raised an eyebrow and stroked his long gray beard. "Are you sure you want to do that?" he asked. His accent made him sound like a mad doctor from a monster movie. He told me he's from Sweden, and I've never met anyone else from Sweden or whose English sounds like his. I've never been so sure of anything in my life, I told him. Why? Are you getting nervous? Kermit was hard to beat, so I figured a little trash talking couldn't hurt. Even though Kermit taught me how to play chess when I was 6 years old, these days we rarely play face to face. I usually made my moves on my way to and from school, and he usually made his moves as he came and went from his daily walks around our Chicago neighborhood. But today was Sunday, so when we meet each other in the elevator, we decided to grab some snacks and sit down for a game. "Well, it is your funeral," said Kermit, raising one eyebrow. He smiled and moved his bishop to block me. Click! I had opened with a series of aggressive moves called the fried liver attack. I know it sounds crazy, but look it up. It's real. Usually I play defense because Kermit is a much better player, but this time I wanted to throw him off his game by going on the offense, and his latest move showed me it was actually working. I attacked again. Click! I wouldn't call the Undertaker yet, I told him. "You are off to an impressive start," admitted Kermit. He had been moving quickly and confidently, but now he was hesitating. "I don't hope you know how to checkmate." "Oh, I know how to checkmate all right. The only question is how many moves it will take me." He picked up his queen and then put it back down in the same place. He tugged at his shirt collar like it suddenly felt too tight. I smelled a victory that would be all the sweeter because I would be there to see the look on his face. Beads of sweat broke out on Kermit's wrinkly peach-colored forehead. He moved again and stopped his clock again. Click! Trying to block me with a pawn. But he was only delaying the inevitable. Suddenly, it was like I could see 3 moves ahead. I knew exactly what I needed to do to steer him toward the end game. "Are you sure you want to do that?" I asked, teasing him. "Maybe not," he admitted. "I am not feeling like myself today. Or maybe you've just forgotten what it feels like to lose." Click. Kermit sipped his tea, which smelled like liquid campfire smoke. He had already eaten all of his lemon cake except the crumbs. "That is possible," he said. "Or maybe," he frowned. "Maybe what?" I asked. It seemed like he was thinking about resigning. In chess, when one player knows they have no way to come back and win, they quit the game by tipping over their queen. It's a super dramatic way to say, "Fine, I give up. You win." Well, Kermit gave up all right, but he didn't tip over his queen. Instead, he rolled his eyes, knocked the pieces onto the floor, and collapsed onto the chessboard. Chapter 2. "Okay, very funny," I said. "You don't have to be so dramatic about losing." Kermit didn't move. I glared at him, at the wispy gray hair on the top of his head. Don't take this the wrong way, but have you considered dandruff shampoo? I asked. Still nothing. I was starting to think dandruff might be the least of his problems. Kermit? I asked nervously. Can you hear me? But the chess pieces seemed more likely to answer than he did. I reached across the board and grabbed Kermit's shoulder. It felt bony and fragile, even through his thick cardigan sweater. I gave him a shake, but not too hard. I didn't want to break anything. He was limp as a piece of uncooked fish. His back was rising and falling, so that at least I knew he was still breathing. Whatever was wrong, there was still time to save him, unless there wasn't. What if Kermit was dying? Help! I yelled, hoping someone outside the lounge would hear me. I need help in here! No one came. Stay calm, take deep breaths, and think, I told myself. I picked up my phone and called 911. What is your emergency? Asked the dispatcher. My name is Minerva, and I'm calling from the lobby of the Arcanum on North Dearborn Parkway. My neighbor just collapsed on a chessboard. Do you know what happened? Well, he played defense where he should have played offense, but that's probably not what you're asking. My guess is he had a heart attack. He's pretty old. An ambulance is on its way, said the dispatcher. I felt like I should do something to help Kermit, but since his lungs were working, he didn't need CPR. I ran to the front door to tell Oscar, the doorman, to expect an ambulance, and he called Dolores DeLitt, the building manager. Moments later, all three of us were standing around poor old Kermit. Oscar looked worried, but Dolores stared down at Kermit like he was something gross that needed to be cleaned off the plush Persian rug. I never liked you playing chess down here, she snapped in her gravelly voice. I wasn't too surprised, because she had never liked me either, but I snapped right back. Are you seriously blaming a board game? That's like sitting down is hazardous to your health, I said. Maybe it depends on who you sit down with, said Dolores. Losing to me couldn't have actually caused Kermit to keel over, could it? The ambulance came quickly from the Dusable Hospital, which is only a few blocks away. My little brother, heck, I'm 12, he's 11, goes there so often that we're on a first-name basis with most of the doctors. We even knew the EMTs. Joan, who's tiny and has a tattoo of a grinning skull on her arm, and John, who's huge and has a tattoo of a teddy bear. Naturally, we called them Big Joan and Little John. You'd never guess they're fraternal twins. Big John and Little John checked Kermit's vital signs and carefully lifted him onto a gurney. They strapped an oxygen mask over his face and rolled him out to the ambulance while Oscar held the door. Then Big Joan hit the lights and siren and floored it, making the tires smoke and squeal like she was just driving ambulances until she got a big break in NASCAR. At least pick up your mess, said Dolores, scowling at me as she headed for our office in the back hallway. And I hope you learned your lesson. And exactly what lesson was that? I wondered as I replaced the chess pieces on the board. Everything had happened so fast. 1 minute, I was playing chess with Kermit, and 10 minutes later, I was alone. Please be okay, I thought, and sank back into my chair with a sick, sad feeling in my stomach. Chapter 3. I pressed the button and watched the elevator glide down from a higher floor. My building, the Arcanum, is 12 stories tall, 120 years old, and is a historical landmark. An atrium in the middle soars all the way up to a huge skylight. Wrought iron balconies ring the atrium, so I could see my neighbors going in and out of their apartments. And it's extremely luxurious, but not very private. People always complaining about the noise when Heck and I play tag. It's not our fault the balconies are perfect for playing tag. Stepping into the elevator, I pulled the door shut and rode up to our second-floor apartment. The elevator is like an iron birdcage, so you have to keep your fingers inside while it's moving if you don't want them sliced off. I needed to talk to Heck about what happened to Kermit, but he was at the farmer's market, and I couldn't talk to our cousin Busy because she was working on her dissertation down at the University of Chicago, and I would have to wake my parents up if I wanted to talk to them. They were in Australia, where it was still 4:30 in the morning. Arcanum is like a magnet for people who are different and weird. Lots of famous Chicagoans have lived here over the years, from artists and architects to aldermen and gangsters, and the lawyers who represented the aldermen and gangsters in court. I guess you could say my family fits right in. My dad, August Keene, is a mathematician specializing in imaginary numbers, and my mom, Aurora Keene, is a philosopher who studies the brain's awareness on itself. Even their casual conversations sound like they're speaking in code. And then there's Heck, who's not only a daredevil, but cooks like a professional chef. If you ask me, I'm pretty normal. I go to school, play AYSO soccer, and once in a while meet up with my neighbor for a game of chess. But if you're the most normal person in a family of circus freaks, you're still kind of a freak, right? My only problem is that I don't have very many friends, especially since my best friend Cherise moved to Rancho Cucamonga in California. My mom says other kids are intimidated by their superior brain power. If that's true, then other kids are looking at it the wrong way, because if I had more friends, my big brain could benefit them too. And I also would have had someone to talk to about what just happened in the lobby of the Arcanum. Chapter 4. I didn't have to wait long to tell the story, but it wasn't anyone I expected. 45 minutes later, I was reading my favorite book, You're Wrong and I'm Right, How to Win Any Argument, No Matter How Petty, in my favorite place, lying on the living room couch with pillows under my hidden feet, when our buzzer went off. It sounds like a sheep farting through a kazoo. I closed the book, sat on the living room couch, and walked into our reception hall. Instead of an intercom, we have brass speaking tubes that go all the way down to the lobby. Like I said, the building is 120 years old. The tubes are great for pranking people. Last year, Hick and I had our neighbors believing that ghosts were whispering to them in the lobby. "Who's there, Oscar?" I called down. "There's a Detective Taylor who says he wants to talk to you, Miss Keene," he told me. His muffled voice sounded like it was coming through the world's longest COM tube. "Send him up," I said. My mind raced. Detective? Was he here about Kermit? When I opened the door, my mystery guest stared back at me. He had dark brown skin and short salt and pepper hair, and he wore a wrinkled blue suit with a tie that looked like ketchup and mustard having a food fight. "Are you here because of Kermit? Is he okay?" "Are you Minnie Keene?" he asked. "It's Minerva," I said. I refuse to be called Minnie. I'm not miniature, and I'm not a mouse. "I'm Detective Wesley Taylor," he told me. "I'd like to ask you some questions." I stepped inside to let him in. "That's a coincidence, because I'd like to ask you some questions, like, why are you here?" He looked at the marble floor, the carved wood panels, and the glittering chandelier in our reception hall like he was recording video with his eyes. Then he took out a notebook and flipped it open. "I'll go first," said Detective Taylor. "Are your parents home?" "No. They're in Australia for the next 10 weeks as guest lecturers in the University of Melbourne," I told him. "Do you have a guardian?" "Busy." "This won't take long, Minerva," said Detective Taylor, sounding annoyed. "No, that's her name," I told him. My cousin Elizabeth Burnham goes by Busy. She's getting her PhD at the University of Chicago and she's super smart." "So you're alone? Until Busy and my brother Heck get back. Tell me what happened with Mr. Hermanson this afternoon." So that was why he had come. I told him how Kermit taught me how to play when I was little, and how he acted a little bit grumpy, but was actually super nice. And even though we usually play chess long distance, today we decided to play in person. I explained how I ran out to the Elegant Grind, the coffee shop on the corner, from a usual order, a half cafe mocha, and that I got a Russian caravan tea and a piece of lemon cake for Kermit. Then I described the game's dramatic ending. "How did you see him before he collapsed?" asked Detective Taylor. "He was definitely sweating," I said. "You just realized I had fallen into my trap." Detective Taylor raised an eyebrow. "What kind of trap?" "Not a literal trap, a strategic trap," I said. "And honestly, there are easier ways to get out of losing than going to the hospital. Do you know anything about chess?" He shook his head. "My game is poker. Did the cake taste in any way unusual?" "I didn't have any," I told him. "And why not?" "It had poppy seeds on it, and they look like bug poop." "Don't you think it looks suspicious they collapsed after eating cake you didn't?" I couldn't believe it. First, Dolores blamed chess, and now Detective Taylor was blaming a piece of cake like he thought it was poisoned. Suddenly, I felt so nervous that I burped. I couldn't help it. Some people get dry mouths or wobbly knees or upset stomachs. I burped. Detective Taylor obviously noticed, but fortunately he ignored it. "You of all people should know that's only circumstantial evidence," I told him, trying to convince him that I haven't done anything wrong. "Just because one event followed another, it doesn't mean they're connected. Are you saying that Kermit didn't have a heart attack? What's going on?" Detective Taylor looked at me without any expression. He was probably a great poker player. He walked past me and began peering at the oil paintings of my ancestors living in the walls of the reception hall. "You're very headstrong, Minerva," he said over his shoulder. "Does that ever get you in trouble?" "Not really," I said, which wasn't 100% true, but it wasn't a lie he could arrest me for either. He kept on going into the living room, so I had to follow him. After pulling a few of my parents' books off a shelf and frowning at their bewildering titles, my dad has one called When N is This Sufficient? The ABCs of X and Y. He moved on to the corner of our living room where he stopped. He seemed particularly interested in a glass display case with a collection of vials, flasks, and beakers. "What can you tell me about these?" he asked. "They belong to my great-grandfather, Vitus Keen," I told him. "He was a chemist who made a fortune after he helped invent the time-to-release capsule." Detective Naylor nodded as if the collection of antiques confirmed something he already suspected. I began to wonder what he knew about Kermit, and if talking to Detective Taylor had been a bad idea. "We'll be seeing each other again very soon, Miss Keene," he said. Chapter 5. I just closed the door behind Detective Taylor when I heard a loud thud, a yelp, and the sound of falling vegetables. I yanked the door open again. The detective was sprawled on top of Heck, whose one wheel was spinning outside. They were surrounded by tomatoes, broccoli, garlic bulbs, and red onions. In addition to being an excellent cook who shops at our local farmer's market, Heck is a disaster on anything with wheels, which is why I know what falling vegetables sound like. I rushed to help Detective Taylor, but he was already climbing to his feet and checking to make sure Heck was okay. Heck bounced right up as usual. "Sorry," said Heck. "I didn't expect anyone to be getting on the elevator." Detective Taylor helped us pick up the produce and put it back into Heck's shopping bags. "So who's the cook? Your cousin Busy?" My brother and I laughed. Busy is smart enough to solve global warming, but she couldn't boil water to save her life. "I want to be a gourmet chef with my own restaurant," Heck told him. "He'll do it too, because everything he makes is to die for," I added, which probably wasn't the best thing to say in front of a suspicious detective. "Is Heck short for something?" asked Detective Taylor. Heck nodded. "His real name is Hector, but he hates that as much as I hate Minnie," I explained, wishing I had time to talk to my brother before the detective starts snooping around. "And where have you been, Heck?" asked Detective Taylor, taking out his notebook again. "I've been at the farmer's market since the sun came up," said Heck, lifting one of the bags. I help out at some of the stalls and they give me free veggies." Detective Taylor wrote something down, nodded at both of us, and got into the elevator. I held our apartment door for Heck, who climbed back on his one wheel and rolled through, using his bags for balance. "So what was that all about?" he asked. I told him everything that happened while he was at the farmer's market. It must have sounded pretty bad because Heck actually tried to give me a hug. "What are you doing?" I asked, taking a step back. "Trying to make you feel better, dummy," he said. "But I still don't understand why that cop was here." "He's not a cop. He's a police detective," I told him, swallowing another nervous burp. "He wants my help on the case." "Yeah, and Gordon Ramsay just called and asked me to co-host Master Chef Jr., scoffed Heck. "You may not know why he wants my help yet," I admitted, "but he'll figure it out." Heck rolled his eyes and then rolled into the kitchen to start dinner. I headed for the living room to put on my headphones. Where he cooks, it sounds like metal robots fighting with trash can lids. "What happened to Kermit?" I wondered as I flopped back down on the couch. I hoped he was okay. He may have been old enough to be my grandpa, or maybe even my great-grandpa, but he was still my friend. If someone had hurt him, I needed to know who it was, not only to clear my name, but to make sure they couldn't finish the job. Chapter 6. First, I had to find out more about Detective Taylor. It's not every day an actual detective comes knocking on your door, assuming he was an actual detective. I burped again. Should I have let him in? That's hard to believe, but there are some people who pretend to be police officers. Some of them just think it's fun to bust people for speeding, but there are others who do things a lot worse than that. When you think about it, playing a cop is the perfect disguise for a criminal, right? With my noise-canceling headphones clamped onto my head so I couldn't hear Heck, I put on the music I usually use for studying. Then I settled into the couch and opened my laptop. I entered Detective Wesley Taylor Chicago into Google search. Right away I know who he said. The images that popped up looked exactly like the man who had been in my apartment 8 minutes ago. They show me that he owned a lot more ugly ties, too. The very first search result was a Chicago Reader headline, "Street Cleaner. A cop catches a killer by returning to his past." I clicked and started reading. Chicago police detective Wesley Taylor knew something was wrong as he examined the crime scene not far from Montrose Beach. A dog walker had discovered the body of a man not far from a large homeless encampment under Lakeshore Drive. The first officer on the scene thought the man had frozen to death, but as Taylor identified the telltale signs of a struggle, he knew he was looking at something even worse. He was looking at a murder. After that, I forgot I was reading. The story was written so well, it was more like I was seeing it, like there was a movie playing in my head. The creepy music in my headphones helped. I probably shouldn't say the horror film soundtracks. Detective Taylor had worked on a lot of murder cases, but this one really got to him, because when he was a kid, he had been homeless too. When he lived in a car with his mom, he couldn't even shower before he went to school. And even though they eventually found a permanent place to live again, Detective Taylor promised himself he would never ignore the homeless people he saw. After studying case files, Detective Taylor saw a suspicious pattern in the deaths of some homeless people. He became convinced that they were all victims of a psychopath. But there were too many homeless people in too many places. His boss wouldn't assign him any other detectives to help him. So Detective Taylor had gone undercover. Even though Chicago's winter was so cold that Michigan looked more like the icy Arctic Ocean, he dressed in clothes from the Salvation Army, slept in a flimsy old tent, and spent time getting to know the real homeless men and women who stayed close to where the other victims had been found. He almost became a victim himself. One night, while he was shivering in his sleeping bag, he saw a shadow on the wall of his tent. A large man ready to swing a heavy iron bar down Detective Taylor's head. "That's the only time I ever shot another human being in the line of duty," he told the reporter. "I'm glad it didn't kill him. I wanted to spend the rest of his miserable life trapped in that tiny cell, hunted by the faces of his victims." I showed as I finally looked up from my screen. Detective Taylor wasn't just a pecker-faced guy who wore ugly ties. He was a real-life hero. And behind those ties, terrible ties, beat a kind and caring heart. But he was also as tough as nails, and he was no quitter. I could tell that he would never, ever give up on a case. And I needed to convince him that we were both on the same side. Chapter 7. Breezy came home just before dinner. When my brilliant cousin comes into a room, it feels like the wind has blown the door open and everything is flying around. "Wow! Dinner smells fantastic," she called out as she emptied the contents of her backpack onto an overstuffed chair. "I know," answered Heck from the kitchen. "How was your day?" I asked, closing my laptop and looking up from the couch. "Highly productive," said Busy. "My advisor and I finally settled on a title for my dissertation. If parallel worlds exist, which one am I in? But now my head hurts and my feet are actually a little bit sore too." I looked down. Her toes were dirty, probably because she wasn't wearing socks or shoes. "I think you lost something," I told her. She followed my eyes, wiggled her toes, and gasped. "Oh, that's so strange. I know I was wearing shoes this morning because I remembered taking them off to shake out some gravel." "You obviously forgot to put them back on," I said. "I'll fill the bathtub so you can wash your feet." "Thanks, Minerva. I don't know what I'd do without you," said Busy, kissing at the top of my head and making me squirm. I'm sure that when my mom asked her big sister, Arabella, if her oldest daughter could look after us while my parents were in Australia, they thought Busy would be perfect. After all, she's 25 years old and has the biggest brain in our family. But Busy's head is so high up in the clouds that she literally forgets her feet attached to her body. And the approaching deadline to defend her dissertation had made her even more distracted than usual, leaving me to babysit our babysitter. Dinner was delicious as always. I told Busy all about Kermit while we ate, and she and Heck asked a ton of questions. Both of them thought the whole situation was just as sad and strange as I did, and they were both impressed with Detective Taylor too. Since Heck did the cooking and Busy breaks too many glasses, I cleaned up afterward. I scraped food off plates, put leftovers in the fridge, and loaded the dishwasher. I didn't mind that stuff, but when I dumped the trash bag down the garbage chute outside our back door, I opened and closed the hatch as quick as I could. Unfortunately, I could still hear the bag slide down the chute and slam into one of the big dumpsters in the basement. Thinking about the basement totally creeps me out. Oscar told me he saw a rat down there, and I hate rats. Also, bats, bugs, spiders, and anything that slithers or wiggles or crawls. Ever since then, I pictured a family of rats waiting hungrily to make our garbage their dinner, all of them getting big and fat and strong from Heck's cooking. Gross. At bedtime, Heck and I talked through the air vent that connects our bedrooms, something we'd done ever since when we were old enough to have rooms of our own. "Why will the police be investigating a case that is most logically a stroke or a heart attack?" asked my brother while I fluffed the pillow on my queen-size canopy bed. "Kermit is too nice to have enemies." I know you think what you know everything," said Heck sleepily. "But as hard as it is for you to believe, they must know something you don't." "That's what's so frustrating. I want to know it too," I said. He yawned so wide I heard his jaw crack. "Well, think it through, Minerva. Either way, they think they know what happened, or they think there's a reason for it." Heck is always the most annoying when he's right. That gives me an idea, I told him. Want to know what it is? But Heck didn't answer. He'd already fallen asleep. Chapter 8. As soon as the final bell rang after school, I hurried upstairs to room 203 and dragged all the desks into a big circle. I was still worried about Kermit, but I also had a reason to be excited. It was the third Monday of the new school year, which could only mean one thing: Club Day. I had arrived at school a half an hour early that morning to hang posters for the new club I was starting, Debate Club. Most people don't know that you don't have to wait until you're angry to have a good argument. You can also do it for fun. Before school, I pinned posters on the bulletin board by the water fountain, taped them to the front doors of the school, and even wedged a few into the frames of the mirrors in the girls' bathrooms. There is no way anyone arriving at Jane Byrne Middle School could possibly miss the fact that the debate club tryouts will be held at 3:20 p.m. in room 203. As the hand ticked onto starting time, I opened my notebook and wrote debate club at the top of a blank page. On the next line, I wrote members. Below that, I wrote Minerva, president and founder. I used college ruled notebook paper, so I still had enough lines for 31 more members, and I could always turn over the page if my club was as popular as I hoped it would be. The hall outside the room began to fill up with kids looking for new groups to join. Each room on the second floor had a different club. There was a gaming club, an anime club, a coding club, a book club, a kickball club, and even a club for people who like to join clubs. But who doesn't like a good argument? I saw kids talking and laughing while they walked past, but none of them had come into room 203, even though the door was plastered with posters for debate club. Were they afraid they would lose every debate due to my superior brain power? The hallway slowly emptied until I couldn't hear any more sneakers sneaking on its polished floor. It was 3:20. I waited 5 more minutes just to be sure, then closed my notebook and stood up with a sigh. A debate club with only one member would never work. People look at you funny if you talk to yourself. If you argue with yourself, they will cross to the other side of the street. Were other kids not interested in my club, or are they not interested in me? And if not, why not? Well, Minerva, I said to myself, your mom has always said that other kids are intimidated by your superior brain power. But who wouldn't want to hang out with a brilliant person who loves to argue? I answered myself. Uh-oh, I thought. I was doing it. Arguing with myself. At least I wasn't doing it out loud. Suddenly, a kid hurried through the door and sat down on the first desk he saw. I am my first member! And he was the last one I would have ever expected. Santos Salgado was the biggest kid at Jane Byrne Middle School. He was so tall he could barely squeeze his knees under the desk, and his long arms almost reached the classroom floor. The other kids were afraid of him, probably because he looked like he could dunk our gym teacher through a basketball hoop. Even though Santos was just a sixth grader like me, he was already growing a fuzzy mustache. Welcome to Debate Club, I said. Santos looked at me while he was trying to decide if I was animal, vegetable, or mineral. If I forgot to mention that, in addition to being the biggest kid in our school, he was also the quietest. People call him Silent Santos, which made me even more surprised that he was interested in Debate Club. But who knew? Maybe he just wanted to get better at public speaking. With a little encouragement, I bet I could get him to open up. It wasn't like anyone else was in line behind him. I clapped my hands, which seemed to startle him, then stepped inside the circle of desks so I could walk while I talked. It's easy to keep people's attention when you're moving. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines debate as a regular discussion of a proposition between two matched sides, I told him. But that doesn't sound very fun, so I defined debate as an argument. Do you like to argue? From the puzzled expression on his face, I think you have decided to classify me as vegetable. But do vegetables sweat? I was starting to sweat a little. Working with Santos was definitely going to be a challenge. I believe I'm qualified to lead this club because I learned logic and argumentation theory from my parents, I told him, plowing ahead. There may only be 2 of us, but if we start now and recruit a lot more students, by the time we're in 8th grade, Jane Byrne Middle School can have one of the biggest debate teams in Illinois. Silent Santos dug in his ear, looked at his finger, and wiped it on the bottom of the seat. I clapped my hands again, and he practically jumped. He would have fallen out of his desk if he wasn't wedged in so tightly. For practice, I'll say something, then you'll argue the opposite opinion, I told him. Ready? Here we go. People learn best when they're sitting down at their desks. Silent Santos looked at me for almost a minute before finally slowly opening his mouth. He is going to speak. Then he closed his mouth again. He popped out of his desk like a champagne cork and started walking away. Aha! You're making a point about arguing without words, I said, showing that we can learn when we're not sitting on our desks. Then I realized he was actually leaving. Wait, where are you going? I asked, while my heart sank like a key in a toilet. Finally, Silent Santos said something. I'm in the wrong room, he told me. Chapter 10. First, my chess partner ended up in the hospital, and now nobody wanted to join my club. It's probably because they're all afraid of debating me, but that still didn't make me feel any better. Fortunately, when I got home, the whole apartment smelled like I had died and gone to heaven, and heaven was a restaurant that only served breakfast. Nick was making breakfast for dinner again. I followed my nose to the kitchen and found him cooking away. Eggs and bacon were sizzling on the stove, and pancakes were lying all over the floor. Why are there pancakes on the floor? I asked. I'm trying to flip them with a pan, he said. I'm getting really close. I'm pretty sure people only do that in cartoons, I told him. Like making pizza dough by spinning it around and throwing it in the air. Heck, grease a frying pan and heat it on the stove, ready to fry again. You're wrong, he said. People really do toss pizza dough in the air. They flip pancakes with a pan, too. I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't cook, so I pulled up a couple of YouTube videos to check. Heck was actually right. I'm definitely going to know this time, said Heck, pouring some pancake batter into his hot pan. Looking up, I saw 3 pancakes sticking to the ceiling. It's too bad we can't eat off the floor and the ceiling, I said. Heck picked up the pan, swirled it to loosen the pancake, and swung it like a tennis player returning a really high shot. The pancake flew into the air, flipped over, and landed on the side that already cooked. You need a 180 flip, not a 360, I told him. No duh, said my brother. He tried again, concentrating so hard that his tongue stuck out. This time the pancake flipped perfectly, but I could accidentally send the pan flying. The pancake landed on the floor. The pan clanged off the wall and fell into the handle of the baking pan, sloshing grease onto the stovetop. Before he could blink, a 6-burner stove was a raging bonfire. Crackling red and yellow flames were seconds away from setting our entire kitchen on fire. I frantically searched for a fire extinguisher, but didn't find one in the fridge, the freezer, or the recycling bin. It's hard to think logically when you're afraid of getting fried to a crisp. I had to figure out something fast. If our apartment caught fire, the whole building would become a towering inferno. Nick turned off all the burners. He hoisted a giant bowl of pancake batter and poured it on top of the fire. The batter sizzled, bubbled, and oozed over the sides of the stove. For a minute, I thought the batter was going to burst into flame too. But like a miracle, the fire went out, and stayed out. We sat down on the floor, staring up the charred stovetop. It's not every day someone flips a pancake and destroys a whole stove, I said. I was so close to nailing it, said Heck. The stovetop was so hot that the batter quickly cooked and hardened. Heck cut off a slice, took a bite, and chewed it thoughtfully. That's not half bad. I'm going to call this recipe Stovetop Surprise. Forget having your own restaurant. You should have your own TV show, I said. You should call it Extreme Cooking Disasters. Heck shrugged. Well, anyway, dinner's ready. Chapter 11. Busy came out of a room and joined us at the dining room table. For a few minutes, the only sound were chewing, sawing, and whistling as my cousin breezed through her nose. Heck's Stovetop Surprise wasn't the best thing he ever cooked, but it wasn't the worst either. Sometimes I think I could still taste his anchovy omelet. While we were eating, I opened my laptop and got to work researching Kermit Hermanson. Heck was right. A detective would only have been assigned to the case if the police suspected foul play. Either they knew Kermit had been poisoned, or they knew there was a reason someone wanted to poison Kermit. But why would anyone go after an old man whose hobbies were playing chess, taking walks, and sitting on park benches? I started with a simple Google search, putting his name inside quotation marks, like I was doing a class assignment. There was only one page of result. Apparently, he had complained to Fred Frizzle, the president of our building's co-op board, about ice sidewalks for the past few winters. I couldn't see that being a motive for murder. Busy wiped her mouth with a napkin and glanced at my screen. Are you researching Kermit? I nodded. He never talks about himself, so I'm trying to find out if someone has something against him, but there's nothing on Google. Try the Chicago Public Library's newspaper database, she suggested. That way, you can see if he's ever committed a major crime, been a victim of one, or gotten involved in some controversy. I'll get onto the website with my library card number. I followed Busy's instructions and searched. All I found were a few mentions of Kermit competing in amateur chess tournaments. Maybe you should check Cook County records, said Busy, because... What? The whoops was because Busy had missed her cup and poured bitter black coffee all over her stovetop surprise. Heck asked for a bite just to see if coffee somehow improved the taste, but the look in his face told me it didn't. I took pity on Busy and gave her the rest of mine. I didn't really want it anyway, because it was starting to taste like charred bacon grease. Then I opened a new browser tab to search public records. The very first result made me gasp. "What is it?" asked Heck. "A legal record of name change. Kermit Hermanson used to be called Kermit Haraskov." "See? You just need to know where to look. Now you need to find out why he changed his name," said Busy, like it was no big deal when she learned about people's secret identities all the time. I googled Kermit Haraskov and found dozens of pages of results. Kermit wasn't Swedish, he was Russian, and not just any Russian either. After leading protests against the dictatorial president of the Russian Federation, he'd be forced to flee to the US because the Russian secret police had tried to kill him. With poison. "Maybe you should make files to keep track of all this information," suggested Busy. "Case files," I said. "Good idea." "What's that sound?" asked Heck, I could faintly hear tapping from the other side of the apartment. "The front door!" I pushed back my chair and raced out to the dining room, through the living room, and into the entry hall. I looked through the people and recognized the curly-haired woman on the other side. I didn't know her name, but she was a building neighbor I'd seen around for years, usually while she was waiting for her nervous chihuahua to poop on the sidewalk. She looked incredibly sad. I opened the door. "I'm so sorry for your friend Kermit. Your friend Kermit died," she said, bursting into tears. Case files. Name: Kermit Hermanson, a.k.a. Kermit Haraskov. Occupation: political activist. Retired. Relationship to case: first poisoning victim. Hair: white, thin on top, bad case of dandruff. Eyes: crinkly, watery. Age: old, like great-grandfather old. Identifying characteristics: bushy white beard, perfect for hiding things under. Personality: nice, but mysterious. Habits: behavior and special talents. Good at chess, even good enough to beat me. Detective notes: it's hard to believe a guy whose hobbies are taking walks and sitting on park benches led an uprising against the evil president of Russia. It's even harder to believe the president of Russia had him poisoned. Thankfully, Kermit survived. But how bad is his luck to get poisoned again? I thought Kermit was just a nice old guy who liked to play chess and eat cake, but it turns out he had a lot of secrets. The Arcanum has a lot of secrets, too. I didn't think I had much more to learn about chess, but he definitely taught me a thing or two. Just hope he stays alive long enough for me to show him exactly how much I learned. Chapter 12. Kermit's dead? Are you sure? I asked. Her bad news made me feel like the floor had disappeared from under me, and I was falling down a deep, dark hall. I heard it from my neighbor, who heard it from Dolores DeWitt, said the curly-haired woman, wiping away tears with her sleeve. I know you played chess together. Please accept my condolences. It just feels so terrible for you. Heck had arrived in time to hear what she was saying. She looked at the two of us and then began backing away. I'm sure you're very busy, so I won't take any more of your time, she said. Besides, I need to tell Kermit's other friends how terrible I feel for them too. It's all just so terribly tragic. You have to go to the hospital, I told Heck as soon as he closed the door. Couldn't we just wait for the funeral? He asked. Now I was crying too. There might not be one. Kermit doesn't have any family. I want to say goodbye while I still have the chance. Heck was going to ride his bike, one wheel, scooter, or skateboard to the hospital, but I already had enough to worry about without him crashing, so I made him walk with me. When we got there, I bought a bouquet of flowers in the gift shop. The fact that Kermit wouldn't be able to see or smell them almost made me start crying again. Oh, hi, Heck, said the receptionist. Are you checking in? Heck has been to the ER as a patient so many times they should give him frequent crasher miles. He's fine, I told her. We're here to say goodbye to our neighbor, Kermit Hermanson. She tapped on her keyboard, frowned at her screen, then looked up. He won't be getting anywhere for a while. He's still unconscious. At first I didn't think I heard her correctly. The words didn't make sense. Wait, he's alive? I asked, confused. The receptionist smiled. He's in critical condition, but I wouldn't give up hope just yet. Suddenly, it didn't feel like I was falling down a deep, dark hole anymore. I feel like a net had caught me just before I went splat on the bottom and launched me upward again. Can we see him? I asked hopefully. You'll have to check with his nurse. Heck and I hurried to the elevator as I wondered why Dolores DeWitt would have told someone Kermit was dead. It was just a misunderstanding. Or maybe it was wishful thinking. On Kermit's floor, Miss Rosalie looked surprised to see Heck walking on his own 2 feet. What's wrong this time? She asked him. He's fine, I told her, feeling annoyed that everyone kept wanting to help my brother. We're here to see our neighbor, Kermit Hermanson. Well, the old man gave us quite a scare yesterday, and we're not out of the woods yet, said Nurse Rosalie. His vitals are unstable, and he's still unconscious. She led us to his room. Kermit had an oxygen tube under his nose, an IV in his arm, and so many wires attached to his body that he looked like a marionette with no one to pull the strings. Only the slow rise and fall in his chest and the beeping of his heart monitor told us he was still alive. Have they figured out what's wrong with him? I asked as I put the flyers on the windowsill. Nurse Rosalie shook her head. The doctors won't tell me, but I've seen them talking to police. I looked at Kermit's kind face and tangled beard. He sure didn't look like someone who could make a dictator feel threatened. Is there a chessboard in this hospital? I asked. Heck rolled his eyes. Don't you ever think about anything else, Minerva? I'm not playing with you, and he definitely can't. Actually, we do have a games closet to keep the patients from getting bored, Nurse Rosalie told me. Speaking of games, said Heck, leaving the room without finishing his sentence. After Rosalie dropped off the chess game, I unfolded the board onto the table next to Kermit's bed. I set up all the pieces and made an opening move with a white pawn. When Kermit woke up, I wanted him to know I'd been there. If he woke up. I was just leaving when Detective Taylor appeared in the doorway. He was wearing the same wrinkled blue suit, but today's tie reminded me of strawberries dissolving in lime jello. Why are you here? He asked suspiciously. Because he's my friend, I told him, and apparently he has a powerful enemy who wants him dead. Detective Taylor narrowed his eyes. An enemy with access to exotic toxins, possibly delivered in a time-release capsule. Would you know anything about that? Chapter 13. Detective Taylor and I stepped into the hall. It seemed rude to talk about assassination attempts in Kermit's presence. On the other side of the nurse's station, Heck had hijacked a wheelchair and was trying to pop a wheelie. I'm not Russian, if that's what you mean, I had told Detective Taylor. Why would you think I know you're Russian? He asked, like he didn't know what I was talking about. Well, you can't still think I poisoned Kermit, because that's ridiculous. Who said anything about poison? You did. The detective's poker face finally broke, and he looked frustrated with himself as he realized I was right. Maybe he was human after all. I noticed 3 things about Detective Taylor. 1, he spoke mostly in questions. 2, if I didn't answer right away, he just kept waiting, which made me feel more pressure to say something. 3, he tried hard not to let me know what he was thinking. I would have written down my observations, but I didn't have a notebook. Oh yeah. 4, he always carried a notebook. Look, you and I both know that Kermit Hermanson is really Kermit Haraskov, I told Detective Taylor. We also both know that a certain evil someone in Russia wants him dead, so you can't really suspect me. What I'm wondering is, why isn't this a case for the FBI? How do you know the FBI isn't involved? He asked. You even answer questions with questions. I decided to fight fire with fire. Well, are they? At the end of the hall, Heck was working up speed in the wheelchair. It looked like he was trying to go around the corner on one wheel. Minerva, do you really think I would reveal such an important information to a potential suspect in a crime? Asked Detective Taylor. You haven't answered any other questions, so I don't know why you'd start now. You only speak of questions, don't you? He almost smiled. What do you think? I think I can help you, I told him. After all, we both want to know the same thing, who tried to kill Kermit. I could be your eyes and ears at the Arcanum, your assistant detective. People will talk to me because I'm just a kid. Detective Taylor smoothed his ugly tie. He tapped his pen on his notepad. He seemed to be considering my offer, or maybe he was considering whether I was still a suspect. But before he could say anything, there was a crash at the end of the hall, followed by the sound of falling bedpans. Guess how I know what falling bedpans sound like. Don't you think you better go check on your brother? Said Detective Taylor. Do you think I should go check on my brother? Then I heard nurses and doctors shouting, and I knew the answer. Think about it, I called as I jogged off toward the scene of Heck's latest accident. Maybe we could solve this case together. Heck and Busy sat next to me on the couch while I started a Zoom call on my laptop. When it connected, we saw my parents sitting in a beautiful garden, while colored birds screeched and flapped in trees behind them. They were wearing light jackets because even though it was warm early fall in Chicago, it was chilly spring in Melbourne. Plus, it was daytime there and nighttime here. When they're on opposite sides of the world, everything is completely backward. Their work takes them away a lot. Before Australia, they spent 3 months in Vancouver, Canada, and next year they headed off to Birmingham, England. Check this out, said Heck proudly, showing them the cast on his left arm. I crashed a wheelchair at a hospital. You had an accident at the hospital? Asked Dad, not sounding very surprised. Minerva was playing chess with Kermit Hermanson, that old guy from the building, when he keeled over and practically died, said Busy. They went to visit him. How long will you have to wear the cast, Heck? Asked Mom. Only a couple of weeks. It's a soft cast because I just sprained my wrist, Heck explained. Don't worry about me, I said, wondering if I have to break both arms to get their attention. I only watched a friend almost die. Mom and Dad looked like they wished they could change the subject. They're more comfortable with big ideas than big emotions. Is Kermit all right? Mom finally asked. No, I told her. He's unconscious. The police think he was poisoned, and I have a theory about how it happened. Let me guess. You're going to tell us, said Dad. Kermit seemed fine while we met in the elevator and decided to play, I said, while I still had everyone's attention. Then I ran out to the Elegant Grind and bought back my coffee, plus tea and cake for Kermit. Excuse me. He collapsed right after he polished off the cake. You should have had me make the cake, said Heck, sticking a finger into his cast to scratch an edge. Anyway, Stacy's suggestion led me to discover that Kermit's real last name is Haraskov and he's Russian. Not just any Russian, but someone they tried to silence before, I continued. I think there was a Russian assassin working undercover at the Elegant Grind, just waiting for a chance to poison Kermit's food. Dad looked dubious. But if you placed the order, how could they have known it was for him? I tried to remember if I had told anyone at the coffee shop that the tea and cake were for Kermit. Even if I hadn't, it was possible they had spied on him long enough to know I was his regular chess partner. Maybe they knew Kermit drinks that particular kind of tea, suggested Busy helpfully. I just don't think it adds up, said Dad, shaking his head. Mom said they had to get dressed for a cocktail party, so they logged off. I was mad at both of them for not caring more, and even madder at Dad for poking holes in my theory. Maybe I was wrong about the little details, but I knew I was right about the big picture. No one believed in me. How could I convince them? I was staring at the sidewalk while I trudged home after school on Tuesday, so I almost didn't notice the ambulance idling in front of the Arcanum. When I saw its flashing red lights shining on the toes of my sneakers, I finally looked up. Oscar was holding the door for Big Joan and Little John, the EMTs, who were guiding a gurney out onto the sidewalk. They weren't hurrying at all, which was strange, since there was somebody on the gurney. Then I realized why they were moving so slowly. The patient was covered in a sheet. The somebody was a body. I started running, thinking, please don't let it be. Please don't let it be who? I didn't know how to finish the sentence. I didn't want it to be anybody, but I especially didn't want it to be anyone I knew. The ambulance burned rubber and roared away before I was halfway down the block. Big Joan was still practicing for a NASCAR tryout, and by the time Oscar opened the front door to let me in, I was panting so hard that I could barely speak. Who was that? I asked him. Serenity Meadows, Oscar told me sadly, from 1102. Is she really? Oscar nodded. She collapsed getting into the elevator on the 11th floor. By the time it reached the lobby, she was gone. I remembered who Serenity was because she had an unusual name like me. She was pretty and always accessorized her workout clothes with flowing flowers and crystal jewelry. Young and healthy looking, she was the exact opposite of Kermit. But if she had someone who collapsed just like he did, maybe there was a connection between them. Had she stood up to the Russian dictator too? Had she also changed her name? Was she secretly working with Kermit, who lived on the floor above her? I hurried through the lobby. across the atrium and opened the door to the manager's office. Dolores the wit was looking at eBay like one of her residents hadn't just dropped dead. I need to see Serenity Meadows' apartment, I told her. I think I might know who had her killed. Dolores made a dry, rasping sound, like she had a leaf caught in her throat. I think she was trying to laugh. So you're a detective now, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What makes you think I would let you trespass on a private residence? What makes you think wasn't even a crime? I'm sure Detective Taylor thinks so, I told her. Then talk to him, said Dolores. But don't ask me to give you a good character reference. I might have to show him my file. She pulled a fat folder off a nearby shelf, dropped it on her desk, and patted it like she thought it might start purring. It was labeled Keen Kids, and I knew what was inside. Copies of all the reports she sent to our parents every time she caught us doing anything she didn't like. The longest one, 10 pages, was about a complete accident. Someone had been sewing a newspaper every morning, and all we did was hide a glue and glitter bomb under it to catch them. Unfortunately, a janitor accidentally pushed it with his broom, and both the janitor and the atrium were covered in glitter that wouldn't wash off for a week. Dolores hates kids, but she seems to hate me and Heck in particular. Don't worry, I told her, getting ready to slam the door on my way out. I wouldn't count on you for a character reference if my life depended on it. Then I remembered I had a question. Why didn't you tell someone Kermit was dead? I asked. Dolores shrugged and put the folder back on her shelf. I said it looked like he dropped dead. You know how rumors spread. I slammed the door thinking, I hope you drop dead. In the elevator, I stared at the buttons for a minute. Then, instead of pressing 2, I pressed 11. I watched the atrium floor grow smaller and smaller below me as the elevator climbed almost to the top of the building. Was it always so loud? The ancient metal contraption sounded badly in need of oil as it squeaked and screeched its way upward. I thought I felt a hiccup coming, but no, it was a nervous burp. Kind of a hic burp. Sneaking into Serenity's apartment seemed crazy, but if I could find anything that connected her with Kermit, I knew I could help Detective Taylor break the case. On the 11th floor, I tiptoed along the balcony, staying close to the wall so the people on the lower floors couldn't see me. I put my ears to the door of apartment 1102 and listened. It was completely silent inside. The doorknob turned, but the door didn't open. The deadbolt was locked. I looked up. All the apartments in the building have transoms, little rectangular windows above the front doors that residents sometimes leave open for better ventilation. But Serenity's was closed. I headed back to the elevator. There was still one more thing I could try. On the 2nd floor, I went through our apartment, out the back door, and past the garbage chute to the fire stairs. People don't always lock their back doors because the stairs are the inside of the building and there's a security door at the bottom. 9 flights of stairs was a lot more than I usually climbed. By the time I reached the 11th floor again, I was tired, sweaty, and wheezing like a flat-faced dog. Serenity's back door wasn't locked. I gave it a push and swung it open silently. My nervous burp was not silent. It echoed in the small vestibule like the belch of a frightened bullfrog. It was time to start my search. Taking a deep breath, I opened the inner door and stepped through. I found myself standing in Serenity's kitchen, which was no surprise. What was a surprise was that Detective Taylor was standing in it too. He was wearing blue rubber gloves. It looked like he had been taking food out of the cupboards. Only now he was staring at me. I burped, a long, low, rumbly one, and Detective Taylor wrinkled his nose. This isn't what it looked like. This isn't what it looks like, I said. Case files. Big Joan Jonker and Little Joan Jonker. Little John Jonker. Occupation, emergency mode technicians, EMTs. Relationship to case, every time someone gets poisoned, they are the first to the scene of the crime. Hair, fire engine red, Joan. Strawberry blonde, John. Eyes, forward, watching traffic. Age, the same, since they're fraternal twins. Maybe 30. Identifying characteristics. Skull tattoo, Joan. Teddy bear tattoo, Joan. John. Joan is tiny, like an elf, and John is giant, like a giant. I have no idea which genius gave them their nicknames. Personality, way too nice, considering that they have to deal with gross accidents all day long. Habits, behavior, and special talents. Little John moves kind of slowly, but Big Joan more than makes up for him. If she drove a race car and not an ambulance, she'd be racking up the trophies. Detective's notes. If I had a normal family, I would never have gotten to know Big Joan and Little John. But my brother is Hector Heck Keen, who never met an accident he couldn't get into. Starting when he was 2 and got all his fingers and toes caught in the baby gate, Heck had been collecting frequent crasher miles at the hospital. Big Joan and Little John have been his chauffeurs every single time. Fortunately, they never complain. My parents actually send them presents on their birthday. Mostly think they just like helping people, even people like hazardous Heck. Chapter 16. Detective Taylor set a bag of fire on the counter and folded his arms. Minerva, do you know what we call a person who shows up at 2 seemingly unrelated crime scenes? He asked. A suspect, I guessed. That's right, he said. Well, do you know who else shows up at seemingly unrelated crime scenes? I shot back. A detective. Is that what you think you are? He asked. I looked around as I gathered my thoughts. There were flour, sugar, a baking pan on the counter, three key ingredients for a baking cake. Detective Taylor's latest tie had a broken egg pattern. All he needed now was milk and butter. Yes, I was with Kermit when he collapsed, which was a coincidence, I told him. But I haven't been home all day. When Serenity collapsed, I was still at school. You could talk to my teachers if you need an alibi. Detective Taylor sighed. And what exactly were you hoping to accomplish by sneaking in through the back door of this apartment? To help you solve the case. If we could find out how Serenity was connected to Kermit, we could prove the attempts on their lives were ordered by the leader of the Russian Federation. Detective Taylor looked up at all the cabinets he still had left to search. He seemed annoyed, like he was tired of talking and wanted to get back to work. Well, if there's no connection, he asked. Well, if these are 2 completely separate incidents, they have to be connected, I insisted. He sighed and tightened his gloves. If you want to be a detective, start by keeping an open mind. Let the facts lead you to your conclusions and not the other way around. Now it's time for you to go. I head for the front door because I didn't want to climb all those stairs again, even going down. The crime scene squad arrived just as I got there. The 2 women and 1 man raised all 6 of their eyebrows when they saw me, but I just shrugged. I didn't feel like explaining why Detective Taylor had dismissed me, letting them see what I was going to do next. I waited until they went into the kitchen, then used a long brass rod by the door to open Serenity's transom from the inside. I slipped out and closed the door behind me. For a while, I couldn't hear anything, but eventually Detective Taylor and his team moved close enough that their voices carried through the transom window. Get all these food items to the lab for testing ASAP, Detective Taylor said. I'm on it, said one of the women. Do you think there's any connection to the old guy? It depends on the autopsy results, said Taylor, but I seriously doubt we're going to find the same exact poison in both victims. Yeah, what are the odds of that? Said the man. We need to find out who's on her last, said Taylor. The doorman told me she had several boyfriends, volunteered the other woman. Boyfriends? I thought. They're getting way off track. Even if one of Serenity's boyfriends had poisoned her, why would he poison Kermit? I needed to find out how they were connected, and fast. When I heard the doorknob turning behind me, it caught me completely off guard. I dove into an alcove just as Detective Taylor stepped out into the balcony. Search this apartment from top to bottom, he told his team. I'm going back to the station to work the phone. I held my breath until he was gone. Chapter 17. When I got back to our apartment, Heck was making himself an after-school snack of homemade ramen noodles with slices of roast pork and a quail's egg the size of a malted milk ball. His friends had signed us cash, but their signatures were already blurred from ramen broth. After kicking off my shoes, I grabbed a handful of Cheez-Its and sat down at the dining room table, where I opened my laptop to research Serenity Meadows. There were 2 of them, I turned out. The first one was a cemetery outside Tampa, Florida. The second one was the woman who lived in my building. It was hard to believe Serenity's neck address would be marked by a tombstone. She looked so alive in the pictures she posted on Instagram, doing yoga poses, working out in the gym, playing volleyball on North Avenue Beach, and trying on lots and lots of outfits. She also took dozens of selfies with guys who were obviously excited to be with her. Maybe they liked shopping too. But I still thought Detective Taylor and his team were wasting time interviewing Serenity's boyfriends. Heck sat down next to me and started reading over my shoulder while he slipped his noodles, splashing my arm in the process. To get him back, I blew the orange cracker crumbs off my keyboard into his face. Oscar told me what happened, he said. I was just trying to find her connection to Kermit, he said. How do you know they're connected? They have to be. It's super rare to have even one poisoning. What are the chances that two people living in the same building got poisoned for different reasons? I clicked on the website for Serenity Now, which was a holistic gym close to our building. The About Us page listed Serenity Meadows as the founder and owner and also had a short biography of her. It said she had been born and raised in Normal, Illinois, before studying sports medicine at the University of Illinois. Aside from her belief in the healing powers of crystals, which, if you ask me, are about as magical as ordinary rocks, she seemed as normal as the place she grew up. She sure doesn't look like an enemy of the Russian Federation, said Hack, still crowding me. Neither does Kermit, I reminded him as I shoved him away. Secretly, I had to admit Heck might be right. Serenity's life story was all over the web, and she had obviously never changed her name. There was also no indication that she even knew where Russia was, much less had an opinion about its cruel leader. So unless the president of the United Federation was an angry ex-boyfriend, there was zero reason he'd target her. If she's not connected to Kermit or Russia, that means one of two things, I said, thinking out loud. Either they are two murderers with different motives, and both of them are using poison, or there's one murderer who has a single motive for murdering two very different people. Heck sucked up a noodle like an anteater, retracted its tongue, flinging a few more drops of broth onto my screen. If there's only one murderer, they probably live in our building, close to the scenes of the crimes, he said. He was right, and since we didn't know the motive, we had no way of knowing if there were more murders to come, and who would be next. What if someone in the building had something against Busy, or Heck, or me? Closing my laptop, I pushed my chair back and slid my feet into my sneakers. Where are you going? Heck asked. To the police station, I told him. I want to talk to Detective Taylor. Heck's eyes got wide. You better not hope he doesn't lock you up while you're there. Case files. Name, Serenity Meadows. Occupation, gym owner. Relationship to case, second poisoning victim. Hair, brown, usually in a ponytail with a scrunchie. Eyes, made up, but beautiful. Age, who knows? I'm going to guess 26. Identifying characteristics, worked out wearing makeup and jewelry. Very fit but didn't sweat. Personality, everyone seemed to like her, especially boys. Habits, behavior, and special talents. Loved shopping, and boys, and shopping with boys. Shopping for boys? Detective's notes. Even though Health Nut Serenity Meadows was a successful entrepreneur who had started her own business, she was also just plain nutty. She thought rocks have magic powers and people give off good or bad vibrations. She also believed in astrology, that the stars and planets can predict what will happen in the future. But she sure didn't see this one coming. Her website says she also believed in reincarnation, that souls can be reborn in different bodies. I believe in science, not New Age stuff, but for his sake I hope she's right. Chapter 18. What can I do for you, Minerva? Asked Detective Taylor. I was hoping we could talk in your office, I told him. There were a dozen other people waiting in the lobby of the police station. I didn't want any of them to overhear what I had to say. The poisoner could have been anywhere. Detective Taylor sighed and used an electronic key to unlock the door behind him. He motioned for me to follow. His office turned out to be one desk of many in a large open room. A few of the detectives were working nearby. A depressed-looking man in a tuxedo who was handcuffed to a chair watched us as we crossed the room. Ignore the guy in the tux, said Detective Taylor. What did he do? I asked. That's Amazing Yandy. He claims to be a birthday party magician, but the only thing he makes disappear is the birthday presents. Amazing Yandy looked like he wished he could make himself disappear. As soon as I sat down across from Detective Taylor, I asked, Have you gotten the lab reports back on the poison yet? Those typically take a few days, he told me. He was still wearing the same broken egg pattern tie, only now it looked like he had actual egg on too. Maybe he had breakfast for dinner when he was hard at work on our case. I know it was wrong, I admitted. Kermit and Serenity couldn't have both been poisoned by Russian agents because Zhane has no connection to Russia, which makes this case a whole lot harder. It certainly does, agreed Detective Taylor, but I still think it's probably one murderer, even if he or she has a different motive for each victim. I continued. What are the odds that two people in the same building would both be poisoned by different people? Pretty long odds, he agreed. If it is one person, though, how could the same person hold grudges against both an old chess player and a young fitness fanatic? That's the million-dollar question, said Detective Taylor. Is this the reason you're not telling me anything that you still think I'm a suspect? Now I was sounding like a detective, speaking only in questions. He shook his head. Even supposing a 12-year-old girl had poisoned two people, I don't think she'd be pestering the police to solve the case. Besides, your alibi checked out. That was a relief, but I didn't like being called a pest. Behind Detective Taylor, Amazing Andy reached inside his jacket with his free arm and removed a black leather wallet. With a slow smile, he opened it to reveal a police badge. I think Amazing Andy stole someone's badge, I whispered. By the time Detective Taylor turned around, the wallet had disappeared. He crossed the room and turned the magician's pockets inside out, finding a bouquet of flowers, a string of silk handkerchiefs, a frightened white mouse, and finally, the pickpocketed badge. Amazing Andy winked at me. Thanks for spotting that, said Detective Taylor gruffly as he put the badge back in his pocket and sat down. Listen, the reason I'm not telling you anything isn't because you're a suspect. It's because you're a civilian. Would an average civilian have discovered as much as I have? I asked. Detective Taylor looked at his watch. Maybe he wanted to make sure it was still there. You're very sharp, Minerva, but you're not exactly ahead of us. Maybe it would help if I had a notebook like yours so I could write things down. Can you tell me where to get one? He opened a desk drawer and started rummaging inside it. While his head was down, I noticed a scribble on the pad of paper by his desk phone. Reading bad handwriting upside down wasn't easy, but I just deciphered it when he closed the drawer and looked up again. I tried not to show any reaction as Detective Taylor slid a pocket-sized notebook across the desk and then handed me a business card. My cell phone number is on the back, he said. If you really want to prove you're cut out for detective work, Minerva, maybe something I don't already know. The notebook wasn't a badge, obviously, but in a way, it felt like he'd just made me his deputy. You won't regret this, I promised. I felt so proud I thought my heart would explode, or my head, or both, which would have been a disaster, because then I wouldn't have solved anything. But I was already catching up to his investigation, because this is what he had scribbled. Hermanson and Meadows poisons match. It was dark outside when I left the police station. I didn't know the area very well, so I walked... Chapter 19. It was dark outside when I left the police station. I didn't know the area very well, so I walked home on the busiest and brightest street, looking over my shoulder from time to time. In some parts of Chicago, getting poisoned is the least of your worries. I should have felt better when I reached my own neighborhood, but my mind was playing tricks on me, and I couldn't stop picturing Serenity's lifeless body under the shield on the stretcher. Since the hospital was only a block over my way, I decided to stop by and make sure Kermit hadn't gotten any worse. But I knew they didn't like nighttime visitors, so instead of checking in, I just breezed past the reception desk like I had somewhere important to be. Kermit's eyes were still closed, and if anything, he had even more wires and tubes plugged into him than before. There was a computer on a wheeled stand next to his bed. Hoping to read the doctor's diagnosis, I tapped the space bar to wake it up. Enter user ID and password, it demanded. I could probably have guessed a user ID from a nurse's name. Could I crack the password? No gaming on hospital computers, said a voice behind me. After I landed, I was so surprised I actually jumped. I turned around and saw Nurse Rosamie. I wasn't trying to play in a game, I told her. It's after visiting hours anyway, she said with a tired smile. Is Kermit doing any better? Asked hopefully. Nurse Rosamie crossed the room to his bed. The good news is that his heartbeat is stabilized. The bad news is that we still haven't seen him regain consciousness. If he doesn't open his eyes soon, he might never wake up. I watched as he examined the connections on his wires and tubes, checked his fluid levels, and studied the squiggly lines and flashing lights on the monitors. It was almost like she was a mechanic and he was a car. until she gently raised his head to fluff the pillow. Kermit seemed so helpless that I suddenly worried the murderer might try to sneak in and finish the job. Has anyone else come to visit him? I asked. Nurse Rosalie shook his head. As far as I can tell, if this old guy is all alone in the world. He has me, I reminded her. Then he's lucky, she said, smiling again. I need to finish my rounds, and you should go home. It's getting late. I'll leave in just a minute, I promised. After she left, I sat down on the edge of the bed and held Kermit's hand. It was cold, bony, and badly in need of moisturizer, but I could feel a faint pulse of blood beneath his skin. Hang in there, Kermit, I told him. As soon as I started to leave, I glanced at the chessboard I'd set up on my previous visit. I didn't realize anything had changed at first. Then I saw it. A black pawn had been moved out to block my white pawn. I felt a smile forcing its way onto my face as warmth flooded my entire body. Kermit had responded to my opening move. Chapter 20. I practically flew to school on Wednesday. If Kermit had woken up and felt well enough to move a chess piece, there had to be a chance he'd get better. There was another surprise waiting when I got to my math class. Silent Santos. I didn't even know he was in my math class. Then again, I sat right in front of the teacher, and he was sitting all the way in the back of the room. He's so quiet that I guess I never noticed him. I waved at him before I sat down. He didn't wave back. The bell rang and Mrs. Binomial smiled at us like she was about to announce a pizza party. I knew that meant bad news. She's as sweet as a grandmother, but when she gives out homework, it's like she thinks she's sending you home with a slice of homemade pie. This morning, we're going to see how much you've all learned in the first few weeks of school, she announced. As she picked up the stack of tests, everyone groaned, except for me and Santos. Tests are no big deal for me, and Santos doesn't talk, so why would he groan? Mrs. Binomial dropped a test on my desk as she began making her way around the room. You have 30 minutes to complete this, she said. You may not be able to finish because there are a lot of questions. Just do your best. I flipped through the test. It was 3 pages long, and 2 of those pages were double-sided. 50 questions! This was going to be a challenge, even for me. Soon the only sound was 27 pencil scribbling. Make that 26. 5 minutes into the test, I heard footsteps at the back of the room. I craned my neck and saw Santos standing at the window. He was staring at something outside. Eyes forward, Minerva, said Mrs. Binomial from her desk. And Santos, when you're ready, please return to your seat. Let's just say Santos didn't exactly hurry. A few minutes later, he shuffled back to his desk. Better get to work, Santos, I thought. The questions were harder than usual. Our teacher may have claimed this was all in review, but I was pretty sure there were things we hadn't covered yet. They weren't hard for me. Remember, my dad knows everything there is to know about imaginary numbers, but I can't exactly rush through the meter. After 12 minutes, I heard the sound of crumpling paper, and then a kerthunk. Santos was on the move again. This time, he was at the back of the classroom, shooting baskets in the trash can. Santos, please don't distract the others, said Mrs. Binomial sweetly. He shrugged and sat down again. After 16 minutes, I heard a pencil roll slowly off the desk and bounce on the floor. Santos walked up to the front of the room and dropped his task on the teacher's desk. He's not even going to bother finishing yet. Santos didn't look down as he walked past me to his desk. I shook my head and got back to work. I needed to concentrate on my own test if I was going to finish without making any mistakes. After 18 minutes, Mrs. Binomial cleared her throat and looked up. She had just finished grading Santos's test. 100% as usual, Santos, she called out. Very well done. I hope the rest of you will be inspired by Mr. Salgado's shining example. Wait, what? Everyone turned around and looked at Santos surprised, but he glared at them until he stopped. I heard through the rest of the test. This new information just didn't compute. Santos was strong and silent, but he was also smart? I was the next one to finish. After 25 minutes, I took my test up to Mrs. Binomial and watched her grade it. Very good, Minerva, she said when she was finished. You missed only 1. 1? Was Silent Santos even smarter than me? Chapter 21. When I spotted Santos walking down the hall after lunch, I didn't even think twice before I ran up behind him and tapped him on the shoulder. I never expected him to be so surprised that he dropped what he was carrying. Unfortunately, what he was carrying was a large tray of tiny bean sprouts placed in paper cups. When he dropped it, the cups exploded like dirt bombs while the tray skid across the floor. The kids around us gasped and stepped back. I think they expected Silent Santos to pick me up by the feet and plant me upside down on a trash can. Before he could attack, I dropped my backpack, crouched down, and started sweeping up dirt with my hands. Sorry, I told him. I didn't mean to surprise you. Silent Santos kneeled down next to me. I was moving these to the library so they would get more sun. If I was surprised to still be alive, I was even more surprised by his waterfall of words. I wanted to tease him and tell him to shut up already, but decided it wasn't a good idea. Together, we scooped speckled potting soil and bright green seedlings back into the wax paper cups, while the other students slowly moved on. Some of them looked disappointed that they hadn't gotten to see me get stuffed into a trash can. Remembering the way Silent Santos had jumped while I clapped my hands in club day, I wondered if he was always on edge because he had to fight with so many people. Nice job with the math test, I said. I usually get a perfect score too. So which club did you end up joining? None of them, he said. Well, which one did you think you were visiting when you came to my room? I persisted. Gaming club. But you didn't end up joining that one either? Silent Santos shrugged. Finally, we had all the bean sprouts replanted. Luckily, we had saved most of them. The big club still doesn't have any members, just in case you were wondering, I informed him as we stood up. He nodded like it was no big surprise. As he turned and headed off to the library carrying a tray, I suddenly had an idea. Which is why it's not debate club anymore, I called after him. I'm changing the name. From now on it's going to be called Detective Club, because I have an amazingly impossible real-life mystery to solve. Silent Santos stopped halfway down the hall and slowly turned around. For the first time, he actually looked interested. What kind of mystery? He asked. Chapter 22. After I told Silent Santos how Kermit and Serenity had both been poisoned with an exotic toxin, and nobody had any idea why, he had agreed to join Detective Club and meet me after school. Now, as we walked to the Arcanum to continue the investigation, I explained what our jobs would be. I'll be the lead investigator because I've done most of the sleuthing already, I told him, leaving out Detective Taylor for now. I'm putting you in charge of security. If I haven't figured it out already, with a killer on the loose, this case could get dangerous. Silent Santos didn't say anything, which wasn't unusual, but the way he didn't say it caught my attention. I was getting better at reading his body language. Is there a problem with that? I asked. He nodded. I was just about to ask what it was, but then I remembered something. When Detective Taylor asked questions, he let the silence build until the other person felt like they just had to say something. It was a good way to get answers. Silent Santos wasn't most people, of course, because he was already used to letting others do the talking. But as I closed my mouth and gave him his own taste of the silent treatment, I could see him searching for words. Finally, 2 blocks later, he cracked. I have anxiety, he said. What does that mean? I asked. Well, lots of things make me nervous. Talking mostly, but also meeting people and going new places. I hate loud noises. I'm even afraid of the dark. What happens when you feel anxious? My heart beats really fast. I get dizzy and I can't decide what to do. Usually, I just read, but sometimes I pass out. We stopped at a red light across the street from my block. While we waited, I looked over at Santos. He was just so big and tall that I had to take 2 steps back just to see all of him. It must be hard to make friends when everyone is afraid of you, I said. I can never hurt anybody, he said, sounding worried. If there's any scary stuff in this case, I think you'll have to handle it. Does this mean I can't be in Detective Club? I told him not to worry about it. But now I had another mystery to solve. If Santos was only going to be my silent partner, how could he help me? As the don't walk signal changed to walk, I heard wheels clicking on the sidewalk. Nick pulled up on his scooter and crossed the street alongside us. What are you guys doing? He asked, looking up at my new friend with wide eyes. Santos actually smiled. I'm in Minerva's Detective Club. You have a detective club? Why didn't you tell me? Asked my brother. I want to be in it too. Okay, fine, I told him. But as we walked into the Arcanum, I started having second thoughts. If one member of the detective club was my ex-Prono brother, and the other one was a kid who was afraid of new people, new places, and even the dark, what chance did we possibly have against the killer on the loose in my building? Chapter 23. Busy was home, so I talked her into helping us practice our interviewing skills. I made her sit on a hard-backed chair in the middle of the living room while Hex, Santos, and I lined up on the couch across from her. I even told her a reading glove so it would shine in her eyes. I saw that one in the movies. State your name, please, I told her. Elizabetha Amaryllis Burnham. Can you prove that's your real name? Asked Hex suspiciously. Sure, said Busy, handing him her University of Chicago student ID. While Hex squinted at it like he was trying to spot a forgery, I looked at Santos, encouraging him to tackle the next question. He took a deep breath. Where were you on Saturday afternoon? Busy thought for a moment and then shook her head. I have no idea. I'll give you a clue, I said. You lost your shoes. Did you find them? She asked hopefully. I was just trying to jog your memory, I told her. Do you remember where you were when you lost your shoes? Busy looked a little bit sad. Those were my favorite shoes. If I could remember where I was, I'd possibly be able to go find them. Never mind the shoes, I said, exasperated. Where did you spend most of that day? Busy frowned into the distance as she tried to bring back the memory. Remember how you told us you'd meet with your dissertation advisor and decide on a title? Prompted Heck. Well, in that case, I guess I was at school, said Busy, but it seems weird that I would have been there on a Saturday. We weren't getting anywhere, so I decided to end the interview. I just hope our neighbors were better at remembering where they were 3 days ago than my spacey cousin. Heck, Santos and I rode the elevator up to 12 Kermit's floor. We needed to talk to his neighbors to find out what connected him to Serenity. Heck wanted to do the knocking, and Santos wanted to stand as far away as possible, which left me in the middle. But even though Heck pounded on the first door like he was trying to break it down, nobody answered. Maybe they're still at work, he said. Let's keep going, I said. The next door, 1202, was opened by a bald guy whose t-shirt was stretched so tightly across his muscles that if he flexed them, the shirt would probably snap in five like a rubber band. Don't bother trying to sell me cookies, he said with a scowl. Do you think I got this amazing body by eating cookies? He slammed the door in our faces before I could even ask him about Kermit and Serenity. Do we look like Girl Scouts? Heck yelled. Santos had already run halfway down the hall. Resident 1202 seems aggressive, I wrote in my notebook. Possible suspect? As we worked our way around the 12th floor, things didn't go at all I imagined. Half the people weren't home, and the other half went and talked to us. Serenity's floor wasn't much better. One old lady also thought we were selling cookies, and she wanted to buy some. Why, I'd love some Girl Scout cookies, she exclaimed. Let me go get my checkbook. We're not Girl Scouts, I called through the doorway as she disappeared inside her apartment. We're detectives. She didn't hear me. Her hearing aids were squealing so loudly I could hardly hear myself. I hope you have tag-alongs, because those are my favorite, she said when she came back. We don't have cookies, I said as loudly as I could without yelling. Okay, maybe I was yelling a little. Her eyes were as big as cue balls behind her thick glasses as she held out a check. I'll order 1 box of every kind you have. I left the amount blank so you can just fill it in. I tried to swat Heck's hand away, but he was too quick. He snatched the check out of the old lady's hand. I'm going to bake some cookies, said Heck after she closed the door. This detective club could be a real moneymaker. I should probably go home too, said Santos. I couldn't believe they were both leaving. We still hadn't interviewed a single potential witness. Detective Club was on its way to becoming a complete and utter failure. Chapter 24. At least try the 10th floor with me before you go home, I begged Santos. Someone has to know something. I could tell he didn't want to, but he reluctantly agreed, saying, You do the talking. Your neighbors are strange. We went down 1 floor while Heck continued to our apartment, planning to bake cookies and cash in on the hungry old lady. I wondered what she'd think when her cookies showed up in paper bags instead of cardboard boxes. No one was home in apartment 1001, but when I knocked on 1002, a well-dressed man opened the door with a smile. I'm Minerva Keene, and this is Santos Delgado, I told him. Do you have time to answer her a few questions. It's really important. My name is Young J. Park, he said. Please come in. I tried to record every detail with my eyes as we walked in, just like Detective Taylor. It wasn't easy. Mr. Park's apartment was cluttered with so many old things he could have opened his own antique mall. On the mantel of the fireplace was a big brass sculpture of Lady Justice. She holds scares for winning the arguments of both sides and carries a sword to show that she's boss and her decisions are final. She also wears a blindfold, meaning she'll treat you fairly no matter who you are. Do you like her? Mr. Park asked when she saw me looking. A lot, I told him. Me too, he said. That's my favorite piece. Now, how can I help you? I took out my notebook and pen, ready to write down his answers. You probably heard what happened to your neighbors Kermit Hermanson and Serenity Meadows. We're trying to figure out if there's a connection between them. Would you like something to drink? Mr. Park asked suddenly. Have homemade lemonade? Yes, please, I said. After you left the room, Santos whispered, Don't drink it. Why not? Maybe he's the poisoner. Don't you think it's suspicious that he lets in, then changed the subject as soon as you told him why we're here? Maybe Santos had a future as a detective after all. When Mr. Park came back with 3 glasses of lemonade on a tray, I realized that even though he was wearing nice clothes, nothing matched. His jacket was plaid, his tie was paisley, his shirt was a loud Hawaiian shirt, and his shorts had polka dots on them. Even his socks were different colors. It looked like he had gotten dressed in the dark. As we all sat down around his coffee table, Santos and I put our glasses down without taking a sip. Mr. Park drank half his glass before continuing. Now, how are you, and what can I do for you? He asked. I raised my eyebrows at Santos. It was like our host had already forgotten everything I told him when he arrived. I wondered if you knew Kermit Hermanson and Serenity Meadows, I reminded him. Well, I really didn't know Kermit, said Mr. Park, but I was a member at Serenity's gym. What happened to her was such a tragedy. Did she ever talk about Kermit? Not that I can recall. Do you remember if she had any enemies? Mr. Park loosened his tie with both hands like it was strangling him. He seemed to be having trouble breathing. If who had any enemies? Serenity. No, but I was a member of her gym. We were going around in circles. Either young J. Park had even worse short-term memory than busy, or there was something wrong with him. As I watched beads of sweat break out on his pale face, my heart started beating harder as I realized I already knew the answer. Because Kermit had acted the same way just before he collapsed. Mr. Park, are you feeling okay? asked Santos as our host took another big drink of lemonade. I'm fine, he said, remind me who you are again? I took out my phone. I think we should call 911. Mr. Park chuckled weakly. Oh, there's no need for that, he said. I'm just a little under... And with that, he fell face first onto his coffee table, scattering the glasses and spilling lemonade everywhere. Chapter 25. Call 911, I said. I put my phone in Santos' hand and wrapped his fingers around it. Santos stared at Mr. Park with a look of horror. Our friendly host was sprawled across his coffee table like a badly dressed starfish. I knelt down to check if Mr. Park was still breathing. The thick glass of the tabletop was fogged near his nose and mouth, so I guessed he was still alive. My knees were soaking wet. The puddle of lemonade was still spreading. Santos was holding my phone like it was a hand grenade. I can't call people I don't know, he said. The only time I do is when I'm ordering pizza. But now Mr. Park was starting to slide off the table. I swept the sticky glasses out of the way so he wouldn't fall on them, then put my arms under his shoulders and helped him down to the floor. Then just pretend you're ordering a pizza, I said. I was grunting like a weightlifter. Mr. Park was heavy. Santos blinked, snapped out of his trance, and pressed the numbers. I was rolling Mr. Park onto his back when I heard a woman's voice from the tiny speaker on my phone. What is your emergency? She asked. I would like a large thin crust pepperoni, an order of cheesy garlic bread, and a sour ranch dressing, said Santos. Listen, kid, making a prank call to 911 is a felony offense, said the dispatcher angrily. Santos stared at the phone, like he couldn't believe what he just said either. I didn't mean you should actually order a pizza, I hissed at Santos. Put it on speaker and I'll talk. I pushed a cushion off the couch and tried to remember my first aid training from summer camp. Was I supposed to put it under Mr. Park's head or his feet? I'm hanging up now, said the dispatcher. Wait, yelped Santos. I can do this. We need help. Not a pizza? She asked sarcastically. Guessing feet. I lifted Mr. Park's legs and wedged the cat's cushion under his heels. Even his shoes were mismatched. One was for golf and the other was for bowling. Start over, I told Santos. Take a deep breath and let it all out. Santos sucked in so much air that if his lungs were balloons, they would have popped. Then, talking faster than someone listing the side effects in a pill commercial, he said, a man drank a glass of lemonade, then collapsed onto his coffee table in front of us. I understand, said the dispatcher, obviously a pro at talking to panicking people. We might think it might be poison, added Santos, just before he ran out of breath. What was the location of the possible poisoning? Asked the dispatcher. The living room, Santos wheezed. The Arcanum, I reminded him. While Santos passed that along and listened to our next question, still using my phone, I held up my hand and whispered, I need your phone. I seemed totally confused, but he unlocked his phone and handed it to me anyway. Taking Detective Taylor's business card out of my pocket, I dialed the number he had written on the back. He answered, Leslie Taylor. Minerva Keene, I said, trying to sound just as professional. How'd you get this number? He asked. You gave it to me last night, I reminded him, right before you told me to find something you don't already know. And did you? I found the next victim, young J. Park, in apartment 1002. While I was talking, Santos bent over Mr. Park and touched his neck. He was telling my phone to his ear, so I guess the dispatcher was telling him how to check for a pulse. Detective Taylor suddenly sounded a lot more interested. And how did you do that? I was questioning him when he collapsed right in front of me, I said. I'm with him now. We already called 911. He's still alive, but we need help fast. I'm on my way, he said, hanging up. My panicking partner Santos was once again as motionless as the body on the floor. He stared at me with big round eyes. What is it? I asked. I think Mr. Park's heart just stopped. Chapter 26. His heart stopped? I repeated. I heard Santos perfectly well the first time, but I needed time to think. I checked his pulse, just like the lady on the phone told me. I couldn't feel anything, he said. Now she says she's going to tell me how to do CPR. Santos tossed my phone to me, but I threw it right back. So do it then, I told him. He swallowed my phone right back without even catching it. It was like he had pulled the pin out of a hand grenade and neither one of us wanted to be holding it when it went off. I can't, said Santos. What if I do it wrong? What if I push too hard and break his ribcage, and one of the ribs stabs him in the heart and he dies, and it's all my fault? That will never happen, I said, batting the phone to him. The truth was that I was afraid to do CPR too. When I gone to Camp Lost in the Woods the previous August, we all had to take a first aid course from the ancient nurse Edith. To pass her test, every single camper had to demonstrate mouth-to-mouth resuscitation by breathing into the creepy rubber CPR practice dummy. And I was last in line. I was so grossed out that I threw up in its mouth. After that, the other kids all called me Barf Girl. But when Santos returned my phone a third time, I realized I didn't have a choice. I got down next to Mr. Park again, set my phone on the coffee table, and put it on speaker. Tell me what to do, I said to the dispatcher. Place your hands in the middle of his chest, one on top of the other, she began. Using your body's weight to help you, push down at least 2 inches. Quickly now. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted out the beat, which made me think of a song my mom likes to play when she's packing for a trip. Rumor Has It by Adele. As I leaned over Mr. Park and began pumping his sternum in a steady rhythm, the words went through my head. Rumor has it, rumor has it, rumor has it. Or maybe it wasn't just in my head. Santos was looking at me like I lost my mind. Are you singing? Asked the dispatcher. That's the radio, I lied. Don't you recognize Adele's voice? The ambulance will be there any minute, she said. If your arms get tired, you can take turns. Take over, I told Santos. He hesitated, then knelt opposite me. When I looked at my hands, he put his hands where mine had been and started pumping. Even though he was doing it a little harder than me, I was sure he wasn't going to break Mr. Park's rib cage. Pretty sure, anyway. I needed to mentally prepare myself for what came next. I really, really wanted to save this man's life, but I was also really, really afraid he'd have bad breath. And I really, really didn't want to barf in his mouth. Okay, I'm ready to do mouth to mouth, I told the dispatcher. We don't really start with that anymore, she said after a moment. Just keep going with the chest compressions. I silently swore at Nurse Edith, who probably hadn't updated her first aid workbook since World War I. Then a miracle happened. Mr. Park coughed. His whole body convulsed like he was trying to bring up a hairball, and then his chest started rising and falling on its own. He's breathing! Santos and I both said at the same time. The front door flew open, and Big Joan and Little John rushed in. You again, said Big Joan, scratching her skull tattoo. Is Mr. Park going to be okay? I asked. Instead of answering, she checked on Mr. Park and helped Little John strap him onto her gurney. Mr. Park was gasping and his fingers were moving like he was playing an invisible piano. It was turning a strange blue-green color. It's going to be touch and go, said Little John as they wheeled him out the door. If you believe in prayer, now's the time. Chapter 27. When the door closed behind the EMTs, it was so quiet that I heard a single drop of lemonade splat onto the floor. You saved his life, Minerva, said Santos. We saved his life, I reminded him. He shook his head and looked at the floor. I was so scared I could hardly think. You did great, I said, except for the part where you kept throwing my phone at me. What do we do now? Asked Santos. After what had just happened, I was so wound up I could hardly stand still, and I couldn't tell what was racing faster, my heart or my brain. What shall we do now? Detective Taylor and his team would be there any minute, but for the moment, there was no one to tell us what to do. Let's search for clues, I told Santos. We snooped through the rest of Mr. Park's apartment and discovered that the whole place was just as cluttered with antiques as his living room. The shelves were packed with leather-bound books, vintage vases, and strange sculptures, and the walls were decorated from floor to ceiling with paintings, photographs, and posters. Orders, here we come, I groaned. We'll never find a clue in here, complained Santos behind me. There's so much stuff I don't know where to start. I walked into a hallway where both walls were covered with framed photos of Mr. Park and his friends. In every single picture, he was the best-dressed man in the group. So why did he look like he had crashed and burned on Project Runway today? Detective Taylor arrived a few minutes later, followed by his crime scene crew and a scientist in a white lab coat. Who's this? He asked, looking at Santos suspiciously. Santos' mouth looked like it wouldn't open without the jaws of life, so I answered for him. This is Santos Salgado. He's assisting me in my investigation. Detective Taylor frowned. Can you trust him to keep our findings secret? His nickname isn't Silent Santos for nothing, I said. We'll see, said Detective Taylor, taking out his notebook. What have you got, Minerva? Mr. Park was a member of Serenity's gym, but he really didn't know her or Kermit, I said, while the detective scribbled. He overdosed lemonade and collapsed shortly after he drank some. If you ask me, his symptoms seemed a lot like Kermit's. Did either of you drink the lemonade? Asked Detective Taylor. We shook our heads. Santos told me not to because he thought Mr. Park might be the poisoner, I said. Then it hit me. Santos, you might have saved our lives. Santos turned bright red while Detective Taylor inspected the puddles on the coffee table and the floor. Look for a pitcher in the kitchen, he told the man in the lab coat. Otherwise, you'll have to test these. The rest of you know the drill. As the crime scene crew got to work, Detective Taylor did something I had never seen him do before. He smiled. At me. Good work, partner, he said. If you hadn't been knocking on doors, Mr. Park might be dead by now. You've given him a fighting chance. Partner? I felt like I was going to collapse on the coffee table myself, but from pride. Maybe I was a real detective after all. Chapter 28. Heck had thrown himself into his get-rich-quick baking scheme, and our kitchen counters were covered with mixing bowls, wire racks, and freshly baked cookies. The latest batch was currently browning in the oven. I love the smell of sugar and money, said Heck. His cheeks and nose were dusty with flour. I hope the old lady likes coconut cranberry walnut crisps. Are you cooking dinner tonight? I asked. He shook his head. Not unless you've got a blank check lying around. I picked up my phone and ordered from our favorite Chinese restaurant. Sweet and sour pork, beef chow fun, vegetable fried rice, egg rolls, and egg drop soup. I knew Heck would have ordered something with eggplant or pig intestines, but that was just too bad for him. Lizzie arrived at the same time as the food. I introduced Santos and told her about Mr. Park while we were all set at the table and got ready to dig into the delicious-smelling Colonel Artons. She seemed especially fascinated by his mismatched clothes and his antique-cluttered apartment. "It's hard to imagine three more different people than Kermit, Serenity, and young Jay," said Busy, as she put three chopsticks in front of my seat. "What's your latest theory on why they were poisoned?" "I think an evil real estate developer is trying to kill all the residents one by one so he can buy their apartments and take over the building," said Heck. Busy frowned and put a single chopstick in front of Santo's seat. "But why?" "Money, obviously," said Heck. "This will make a killer four-star hotel. If they're working their way down from the top of the building, they've got to stop them before they get to us." I followed Busy around the table with plates, moving chopsticks to make sure we each had two of them. Eating with one chopstick is harder than dancing on one leg. "Well, I'm starting to wonder if the Arcanum is actually a safe house for political refugees," I said. "That might make sense for Kermit," said Busy. "I think Young Jay is Korean, so it's theoretically possible he's an enemy of the North Korean dictator. But who on earth would have been targeting Serenity? Junk food companies? People who ate exercise?" I guessed. Our cousin wasn't finished. "And if this building really is a safe house, what are your parents hiding from?" Heck was so excited that he dropped the napkins. "Maybe Mom and Dad are secret agents." I wanted to believe it, but that was just too far-fetched. A mathematician and philosopher as secret agents? Although Matt explained why they traveled all the time. "Maybe a crazy person is just poisoning people for fun," said Santos quietly. That shut everyone up. We all sat down and started scooping food onto our plates. I was starving. I picked up a humongous piece of sweet and sour pork and was about to shovel it into my mouth. Then Busy said, "Whoever it is, if they're poisoning food, and they're going after people who live in the building, then we could be next, right?" I stared at the hunk of meat on my chopsticks, glistening with delicious orange sauce. Was it also dripping with poison? Everyone else was staring at their food, too. One by one, we all put our chopsticks down. Even Heck, which surprised me. With all the weird stuff he eats, I wouldn't have expected him to be afraid of a little poison. Then I realized that something had been bothering me ever since we left Mr. Park's apartment. There were clues, and they had been staring at us right in the face. Number one, he was confused and forgetful even before he bought out the lemonade. Now that I thought about it, Kermit had been acting funny before he had his cake and tea, too. Number two, the usually well-dressed Mr. Park was as mismatched as a thrift store mannequin, which meant that he had been poisoned even before he got dressed. So it couldn't have been in the lemonade. I picked up the big piece of sweet and sour pork again, crammed it in my mouth, and started chewing. The taste was absolutely to die for. Heck, Busy and Santos stared at me like I'd suddenly grown tentacles. Trust me, it's fine. Heck didn't even ask why the food was poisoned. He just picked up his chopsticks. "If I'm gonna die, I'm not gonna die hungry," he said gleefully. Busy tried to taste her egg drop soup, but since he accidentally used her fork, she didn't get very much in her mouth. Santos took a tiny bite of egg roll and chewed it slowly, looking like he expected to fall face down in his food any minute. After I explained my logic, though, even Busy and Santos started to relax and enjoy the meal. I'm sure it was safe. Well, 99% sure. I still had one nagging question. If people weren't being poisoned through their food, then where was the poison coming from? Case files. Name: Young J. Park. Occupation: actuary. I don't know what that is. Relationship to case: third poisoning victim. Hair: black. Eyes: brown. Age: 40. Approximately. Identifying characteristics: extremely well dressed, except when he isn't. Personality: outgoing, friendly, fun. Habits, behavior, and special talents: social butterfly, loves spending time with friends, knows all the best restaurants, theaters, and museums in Chicago. Detective's notes: Young J. Park might be the best cheering man at the Arcanum, so when he greeted us wearing completely mismatched clothes, it should have been obvious something was wrong. If only I had figured it out in time. I thought the lemonade was the important clue when I should have been looking at his shoes. Well, I did look at his shoes, but I still missed the clue. But if people aren't getting poisoned by their food, how is this happening? More importantly, why is it happening? Chapter 29. After dinner, I went into my room and called the hospital to find out how Mr. Park was doing. Santos had gone home, Heck was baking cookies and busy with singing in the shower. Even though my door was closed, she was just as loud as if I was playing Spotify in my room. If Spotify played out songs out of key and with random lyrics. Are you a relative of Mr. Parks? Asked the woman who answered the phone at the hospital. No, but I'm his neighbor, I said. We can only share information with family members, she told me. What if he doesn't have any? That would still make you related now, would it? The woman on the phone obviously liked to argue as much as I did. Have to bring my A game. What if I told you that I saved Mr. Park's life today? I asked. I wouldn't believe it, she said. You're obviously just a kid. Now she was making me mad. Voices can be misleading, I said. What if you're just some stupid kid who happens to sound like an annoying adult? Is there anything else I can help you with? She asked in an ice-cold voice. Who says kids can't save lives? I yelled. She hung up on me. Yelling never helps in an argument. When I called back, I disguised my voice. I pinched my nose with my left hand and wiggled my voice box with my right hand. I sounded like an old lady running a paint mixer. Kermit Hermanson's room, please, I quavered. I'll put you through the nurse's station, ma'am, said the operator politely. Since I proved that you can't tell how old someone is just by hearing their voice, I declared myself the winner of the argument. When Nurse Rosalie answered, I spoke normally. This is Minerva Keene. Do you know anything about a new patient named Young J. Park? I don't, but this is a big hospital, she said. Well, can you tell me if Kermit has woken up? I asked. Has he made any new chess moves? Not that I know of. I guess I can look at the chessboard. Nurse Rosalie put me on hold. The waiting music was peaceful and relaxing. If you ask me, they should pipe busy singing into the hospital. That would make people want to get better and go home as soon as possible. I'm in his room, said Nurse Rosalie a minute later. What should I look for? I play checkers, not chess. Well, at the start of the game, each player's pieces are lined up in 2 rows on their side of the board, I explained. Look for any pieces that may have been moved into new places. Well, there are 2 short pieces in the middle, one white and one black, she said. Those were the pawns where Kermit had blocked my opening moves. There's also a white horse thingy in front of the rest of the white pieces. That was the night I had bought out on my second move the last time I was here. If that was all, then Kermit hadn't woken up again. Are there any others? I asked hopefully. Yes, a tall black piece with a pointy head. There's 2 spaces in front of the horse. Closing my eyes and picturing the board in my head, I saw that Kermit had moved his bishop diagonally, taking a position in the center of the board. I was relieved that Kermit had woken up and moved again. But I was also puzzled, because what he had played didn't seem like him at all. He was targeting a lowly pawn, which made 0 sense. What was he doing? Chapter 30. I heard a bump outside my door, then a thump, then a crash, followed by so much noise it sounded like a velociraptor was trapped in the hall. Busy's out of tune singing continued from the bathroom. Whatever it was, she obviously hadn't heard it. I stuck my head out and saw Heck staggering toward me. He was holding his throat with both hands and his eyes were bulging with terror. My skin prickled with icy fears, he croaked. Help me. What's wrong? I asked, even though I was sure I already knew. The poisoner had targeted us. Heck's voice was a ragged whisper. It was my cookies. He slid down the wall, flopped onto his back, and started flailing like an electrocuted slimmer trying to do the backstroke. Busy! Help! I yelled. Apparently she had water in her ears because she kept on singing. I couldn't believe it that my own brother had become the poisoner's next victim. How had I been wrong about the danger to our food? I was so terrified I could hardly think. But I already saved 1 life that day. It was time to save another. Crouching down next to Heck, I put my hands on his chest and started doing compressions, making them extra deep and hard. I heard Adele song in my head again. Rumor has it, rumor has it, rumor has it. Heck was turning red in the face, so I pumped even harder until he started coughing and gasping. Finally, he pushed me off and squirmed away. Stop it, Minerva, he said. I'm okay. I was just messing with you. It took me a moment to realize that my brother had actually been poisoned. He was just being a jerk, playing a stupid joke, but now I wanted to kill him myself. I balled my fist, ready to punch him so hard that his head would literally spin. But for brains, I yelled. I didn't think you would actually believe it, he whined as he stood backward out of my reach. I stalked toward him. I want to believe it. People are just getting poisoned for real all around us. Heck scrambled to his feet and ran. Just then, Busy opened the bathroom door to see what was going on. Heck crashed into the door and dropped like a box of rocks. Too mad to even see if he was okay, I went back into my room and slammed the door. Good luck finding someone to help when you really do get poisoned, I yelled, because I won't bother. Heck didn't apologize until I was lying in bed with the lights out. Sorry, Minerva, he mumbled through the air vent. I may accept your apology in the morning, you moron, but not tonight, I answered back. I thought you know I was faking since you were the one who figured out the food wasn't poisoned, he said. That's not the point, I said. Tonight, Santos and Busy made me realize something else. I've been so obsessed with helping Detective Taylor solve the mystery, I haven't taken the danger seriously. Me neither, admitted Heck. Well, we both should, I told him. Until we find out who's doing this and how, no one in the building is safe, including us. Alright, everybody. I'm going to stop right here for now. So be sure to tune in next time for part 2 of my story. So until then, thanks for watching, and be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscription, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.